I'm Matt.
I'm Shane. And you are about to listen to an excerpt from a Comic Movie Marks podcast.
So if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that like button real hard. And make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks. And always remember,
if trailer trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
Now we're going to kick off with All Hail Snyder.
yes.
Snyder himself, all in the news. Justice League, all in the news. WB, with nothing but a fat load on their face through all of this.
Oh, man.
Does not look good at all for WB. So
one of our followers, I can't even remember who it was, said, I wish...
we got like 5.
I know, and I can't remember any of them. But one of them commented and said, it's too bad that WB owns DC.
Yeah.
And I was like, at this point, yeah, it is too bad.
After
all this shit.
Yeah, Paramount or something, Universal.
Yeah.
After we've kind of skimmed through that phase 1 of Marvel movies and stuff, and how they were so much better.
Yep.
So Universal and Paramount were part of that.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Pass it along, Warner Brothers. You obviously can't figure your shit out.
Maybe at this point. Anyway, so some troubling news from the land down under of Warner Brothers, Southern California. It's the land down under.
Yeah.
We got an article here, basically a timeline, talking about how WB fired Zack Snyder. He did not willingly leave Justice League.
Yeah, the article is from Cinema Cure, and the writer is Haroon Sharif, and he posted this on January 30th. And this is kind of some more behind the scenes stuff that he I guess decided to talk about. He's the first paragraph, basically, he said, "I said this before, I will say it again. There's more to the behind the scenes mess of Justice League than what was written in the rap piece and other articles. I've been hunting for the truth since January," so not very long. I'm just kidding. Probably the previous January. "And that Justice League is out in digital. It's time to reveal the new stuff I found."
You may want to read the rap piece first, and I'm not gonna. So that's what he said. Here are some other things to know so far. One thing written below is wrong. Can you find out? Zack was heavily working on JL, Justice League, ever since BVS was released. Really? So WB wanted to, but didn't boot Snyder, according to my friend Fiona,
owner of the Snyder Cut website.
A staff from the WB told her that WB put great deal of pressure on Zack after the release of BVS. Right there on January 2017, Zack posted this on Vero, and it kind of almost looks like Rorschach.
Yeah, it is, because that's from the the Watchmen movie, "Never Compromise, Not Even in the Face of Armageddon." It was his caption to his Vero. This was on his Vero account, and it's Rorschach. It looks just like him. It's kind of a shadowy figure on a staircase, but
black and white.
Yeah, it looks just like Rorschach, and then he has Rorschach's quote, which is so fitting. And this is just more, as you read this article, it starts to tick you off a little bit. We have additional news that we're gonna talk to regarding Zack Snyder that we read today. But when you're going through this, you're like, fuck, like that does kind of line up. That he's basically saying, with this picture, like, Warner Brothers is trying to get him to change the way that he's doing things, and he's saying, nope, fuck you. I'm an artist, and I'm not going to compromise my vision for you dumbasses.
So the article continues, when Zack showed his cut to executives, they hated it. The executives and Jeff Johns thought that the first cut was awful. Apparently not unwatchable. Jeff Johns and WB hired Whedon, not Zack, when Zack had to leave production because of his personal tragedy. WB and Whedon literally turned the movie into a complete comedy chipmunk film with reshoots. The cast was against Whedon's changes, but at the test screenings in September, at least the audience responded to his humor and quips. So they were kept.
Oh, fucking course they did. That part also where he says the cast was against Whedon's changes.
They didn't have any other options either. It's like if you gave them the fucking real movie compared to this little like fucking chipmunk brigade, as he put it. Like, oh, okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, funny laughs. Yeah, haha. The part where he talks about the cast was against Whedon's changes also kind of feeds into the rumor about Ray Fisher and him wearing the I Love Zack Snyder shirt at Comic-Con and stuff like that, kind of as going against the grain and going, oh, I know exactly how this movie is going to turn out. All that stuff. This kind of feeds into that a little bit more of like, maybe Fisher did kind of know, hey, I'm getting fucked over in this. This movie's going to end up being shit, especially compared to what it was supposed to be. Cyborg being the heart of the Justice League film, and then ultimately what we got is just kind of a side bitch.
Yeah. So the article continues. Did you find the wrong sentence? Well, here it is. When Zack had to leave the production because of his personal tragedy, that is wrong. Do you want to hear the heartbreaking truth? Josh L. Dickey, who wrote for Variety, The Wrap, Mashable, etc., revealed the truth when he decided to leave entertainment journalism. So apparently he couldn't keep a job, so this guy's apparently breaking a scoop.
Yeah. So one of the things, and he had this long list. I went to his Twitter page specifically, and he has this long list of tweets of all this nonsense that he's just kind of throwing out there. And this was one of his tweets. He said, since I'm shifting into DGAF mode.
Don't give a fuck.
Oh, boom, blew my mind, because I was like, I have no idea what that means, but all right. But, yeah.
I'm in DGAF mode.
What's DGAF mode? Who's Captain Tibbet? That's TBD, to be determined. Just kidding.
Yeah, you got me on that one.
Mighty Ducks. So he says, since I'm shifting into DGAF mode, here's a hot one for you. Zack Snyder was fired from the DCEU just over a year ago. Couldn't write it quite that way at the time. Was able to tap dance around it.
Dickey pretty much confirmed that WB took Zack off Justice League and used his daughter's death as a PR move. And here is something I got from a source who went to San Diego Comic-Con 2017. Remember what I told you from everything I overheard during San Diego Comic-Con? I couldn't say it because I wouldn't be believed, but I told you he was removed. The worst part about it is WB/DC reps spoke openly about it at San Diego Comic-Con. Even Marvel studio heads knew.
And then, so the article continues.
It just keeps going.
Yeah. It's a pretty long, extensive article, but the timeline is important, so that's kind of why we're going over each piece of it. And then it says the original Mashable report made the following claim. Multiple sources with knowledge of Warner Brothers' plans say that as the DC Extended Universe moves forward, the Snyders will no longer have anything at the level of creative influence that got the franchise to this point.
Quoting Screen Rant now, although this tweet is sure to spark a great deal of discussion and speculation, it's important to remain aware of the fact that Snyder departed Justice League in the wake of an awful tragedy. And to be as sensitive to that as possible, ultimately, whether he was fired or left on his own volition doesn't really matter. It's been known for a while that Snyder is no longer the creative lead of the DCEU. And knowing the reason why doesn't change much. Yeah, it fucking does.
So then Sharif continues kind of with some more stuff. Basically the reshoots took place in England, and then
June and July.
Yep, and then a few days in August. And he says, in my hunt for the truth, I checked the details we got previously from several sources, including Batman on Film. Like them or not, they have been right 80% of the time. Bill from Batman on Film has respect from both Nolan and Snyder. That I find hard to believe. That
that's some
Snyder and Nolan respect him, who's just like some fucking fan site. Anyways, he was right about Affleck leaving the directional duty for the Batman, extensive reshoots for Justice League, etc. And then a person known to Bill and Rick Shue of Batman on Film was part of the small audience who saw the Snyder cut of Justice League. What were his thoughts? Note, this guy is not a big fan of BVS, disliked Suicide Squad, but loved Wonder Woman. And basically the person known to Bill and Rick Shue of Batman on Film, his quote was, JL is going to blow your mind. It's going to really impress you all.
He is one of the few people who watched the Snyder Cut. The person above Kevin Smith's friend and the source from one of the previous articles said that the Snyder cut is better than the movie that we got released in the theaters. Well, no shit. Almost anything is better than the shit we got released in the theaters. The person above also mentioned that a lot of what he saw was incomplete, according to the source when asked on Justice League. A lot was cut. Probably half an hour at least, this is a lot of stuff we already know.
Yeah.
From what was filmed during principal photography, when you add it, the stuff that was reshot new under Joss Whedon, I think it's fair to say that the final product is probably more than a tad different what was originally planned.
Again, no shit.
No shit. And more. Justice League has been in a total state of change from the moment that Batman v Superman hit theaters last year due to the critical and audience reaction. This is why there was a studio-mandated course correction, and DC Films under Jeff Johns and John Berg was created. It's kind of funny to me that everybody keeps going back to Batman vs. Superman hit theaters. But did they not pay attention when Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Cut was released? Like, the change in the atmosphere to that movie is just, it's one of the top selling. It's in the top almost 40, I think now, of fucking Blu-rays sold ever.
Yeah, ever. Yeah.
And the drastic switch to when they actually showed the director's vision is massive. It was a huge thing. A lot of people changed their mind.
Yep, people apologizing directly to Zack Snyder on Twitter, like all sorts of stuff.
But yet, all the time, the focus goes back to what was in theaters. It didn't make them think like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have tampered with the cut. Maybe we should just leave it as it is, leave his vision alone, because it seems to be, at least audience-wise, appreciated more.
Yeah, you would think.
But they went the complete opposite route. It's just crazy how this ultimately went.
Yeah, so even though a lot of people are kind of taking a lot of this news about Snyder being fired to heart, you know, because one home dude decided to be like, all right, I'm gonna release this information on Twitter. Here's the scoop. There's a lot of kind of this stuff that Matt and I make fun of. You know, take this with a grain of salt. The source in quotes of, you know, some random fucking
guy
people.
couldn't keep a job.
Right, yeah.
And now is out of media.
Yeah, essentially. So there's a lot of stuff in this article, even that Mr. Sharif wrote, that still is a lot of speculation. A lot of information that's just kind of being put out there, and we're supposed to take it, you know, as truth.
With no lube.
Yeah, pretty much. One thing that I will say is there are some really interesting things that do kind of tie together. You have the Zack Snyder picture of Rorschach that we had talked about. The stuff about how the cast, not in favor, I guess, of Whedon's style and a lot of his changes. You know, again,
Ben Affleck even came out saying that he didn't like Whedon, how he treated the cast too as well.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of stuff that does kind of line up with, like, okay, there's obviously some behind the scenes drama. You know, and who knows, maybe Warner Brothers did want him out eventually. Who knows how the movie would have ended up, you know, if the tragedy wouldn't have happened in his life and he would have just continued to work on it. Maybe we never would have been brought in, but again, that's also speculation. So there's just kind of a lot here, you know, and people, again, like typical news that gets put out there, they take it completely to truth. So then again, today we got another article. This is from fandomwire.com, and the writer of this is Simone Miller, or Simeon Miller.
Yeah.
And the title is Zack Snyder was not fired from Justice League. So now we have conflicting things in this
counter argument.
Yep, exactly. And this came out 17 hours ago. This guy brings up a great point though. Whereas all the other stuff is speculation.
My guy,
my source.
Guy.
Yep. Batman on film, you know, blah, blah, blah.
But they got 80% right, which is totally able to confirm that.
Yeah, exactly. Also,
we get about 90% of our stuff right.
So fuck you. Yeah.
All those videos of Joss Whedon keeping Zack Snyder's tone alive. Might as well delete those off of YouTube.
No shit. No shit.
All that cocksucking we did on that
one. Yep, load all over our face. Dude, just like fucking Warner Brothers. So in Miller's article on Fandom Wire, he basically kind of goes into detail and says, you know, over the last few days, numerous sites have been reporting the headline that director Zack Snyder was removed from Justice League in early 2017, and Warner Brothers Pictures simply forced him off the project by exploiting the tragedy of his daughter's suicide as a way to avoid negative publicity. I will say that does sound like something a big corporation would do.
Honestly, when that first went down, that's actually what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can buy that. I really can. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but that was something of like, you know what? That could have just been like, sense. Oh, this is perfect. We don't have to have egg on our face or anything on our face, and we can force him out like we wanted to and bring in our guy. And then even after the final product that we ended up getting, some of that kind of makes sense. You know, they wanted, no, let's completely change the transition.
Let's just say it worked in DC WB's favor,
right.
In their eyes,
right?
Favor to this whole thing went down like this, whether they fired him or not.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, based on the final cut that we got. So then Miller's article talks about the report from Mashable writer Josh Dickey was met largely with skepticism after Zack Snyder's wife Deborah had stated that her and Zack were beginning to work with Patty Jenkins on Wonder Woman 2. The studio had fired the 3-time DC director, then he would not be collaborating on a sequel to another DC film.
So after reading that, Shane and I kind of triggered around, flew around the internet to try to find where Deborah Snyder was talking about working with Patty Jenkins on Wonder Woman 2. And we found an article from November of 2017. So it was actually just a little bit before Justice League was released, but this is November 2017. This is apparently months before he was, or after. Right. This was months after he was supposedly fired.
Right.
You don't have that article? Ready to go?
I was still on the phone.
Oh, I thought you were getting it already and everything. No. I was leading you in.
I know, it was perfect. I was like, oh, fuck, I thought you had it.
No, you found it.
So just fucking leave all that. So an article from CosmicBookNews.com. This was published in, as Matt said, in November of 2017. Zack Snyder still involved with DCEU. Justice League 2 would be amazing. So in it, again, kind of reiterates some of the same stuff. Zack Snyder was forced to step away from the Justice League due to a personal matter, with Joss Whedon coming on board. And then there was a question whether or not Zack and his wife, Deborah, would continue in the DC cinematic universe. But the good news is they are apparently still involved. And in an article with USA Today while promoting Justice League, which a lot of people said that they didn't do any promoting of Justice League. He may not have, but it seemed
I know
like
Deborah did, yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember seeing that.
So that was interesting. So she says, well, actually, I don't know where this quote is coming from, but the USA Today article says the Snyders have been working with Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins on her sequel slated for November 1st, 2019. And then Deborah Snyder also comments on a possible Justice League 2, of which producer Charles Roven has mentioned, as well as J.K. Simmons noting Justice League 2 would be amazing. But the article further says DC's lineup is already plenty busy, which more than likely means Justice League 2 is dependent on the success of the first film. So it, yeah, still kind of out there. And then it says regarding the pair's departure from Justice League and Joss Whedon coming on to help, Deborah Snyder offers, Joss was part of the family, so we are lucky that he was there to pick it up. Deborah Snyder says, adding that the release is bittersweet. It was such a difficult decision, but sometimes you have to put your family first. Also, as a couple, we live and breathe these movies. Now that the movie is coming out, it's a difficult time for Zack because he couldn't really see his vision all the way through.
So then you have to question whether or not a wife would literally sit there on a stage while she's promoting the movie that supposedly her husband was fired from.
Right.
And then she's putting Joss Whedon over.
Which the initial article was saying, no, that was Warner Brothers that hired him, not the Snyders, which we had heard before. No, Zack Snyder specifically appointed Joss Whedon,
right.
Which who knows if that's true. I mean, that's a complete...
So that's where the thing is, yeah. Everything is contradicting itself in some manner here. And that's what that's the reason why we're wanting to read both these things, because they're all contradicting themselves in this. And like, it would be really weird if you have Deborah Snyder, the man's husband, or the woman...
Deborah Snyder.
Yeah, Deborah Snyder, the woman herself, the husband of the guy that just apparently got fired and got replaced by Joss Whedon.
The wife of the...
God damn it.
You said the husband.
Whatever. Her husband got fired from Justice League. Why would she be doing that? I mean, is she really trying to keep a job somewhere?
Yeah, and this is all in,
she just wouldn't
November.
Go. Like, if she actually had a... I mean, they don't have to trash WB, because obviously if Snyder has been fired, he hasn't really done that, other than liking some posts. Everybody thinks he's trolling WB with that. I guess if that's your version of trolling... I guess then...
That's pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
Just liking some posts.
Yeah. So I just don't see that scenario why she would even be part of it, because more than likely if he goes, I assume she goes. I picture
absolutely.
that they are a package deal because they've been like this since Man of Steel and other things. So I figure they're a package deal. So who's right? Who's really ultimately right in this?
Yeah, well, and of course, Zack Snyder's sexist, even though he brings his wife on every project that he does.
So he can exploit her.
Yeah, fuck, I guess.
So the article about Zack Snyder not being fired fired, not farted. This was the fact that a lot of journalists and those critical of the DC Extended Universe did not consider before publishing and circulating the article, which led to some confusion among general public at the time when the climate surrounding the franchise, DC, as a whole, and its franchise is not exactly at its best. The Snyder-Whedon collaborated Justice League has been the subject of widespread scrutiny and controversy. A large contingent of DC fans launched a petition to release the Zack Snyder cut of the film, which is something that Warner Brothers is unlikely to do, as it would be the studio spending more money to re-release another version of the film that did not perform well at the box office. It was understandable for Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, as the film did break even and turned a small profit.
And then this is some really important information. Forbes writer Mark Hughes took to Twitter recently to debunk this rumor for those who were confused by the recent rumor and clarified that the story that was published as soon as Snyder stepped away from the big-budget superhero film was indeed the truth. Snyder was working on the film until May, when the two-time Avengers director Joss Whedon took over post-production and reshoots. So the tweet says the reports claiming Zack Snyder was fired by WB from Justice League in late January, early February are false. He started working on his edit of the film in early January, and he was still actively working on edits into May. And that's from, again, Mark Hughes, and he had tweeted that, and he's a writer from Forbes. So again, more kind of contradictory stuff here. It is kind of funny, because people are saying, "Oh, he was fired at this point," and just shake your head, stupid, smack yourself in the face, funny. Just all this contradictory information. There's a lot of stuff as far as when Zack Snyder stepped away, and even in the article talking about no, he was fired after he had his cut, or he showed his cut. Jeff Johns hated it. The Warner Brothers execs hated it. But then other people are saying, no, there's not a Zack Snyder cut. So what the fuck is it? Is there a Zack Snyder cut or not? Obviously, he showed them something.
Again, like we've talked about before, I think it's all semantics.
Yeah.
There's obviously a play on words. We got more stuff coming on when we talk about the Blu-ray cut here. We'll get into that. There's obviously an established rough cut. It may not be completely perfect on the CGI. It may not be rendered to absolution, but I think and it's obvious as fuck by now, that there was a story that Zack Snyder had, and he had a mashup of a fucking movie before he left. Maybe not everything was perfect. Not everything was rendered exactly the way they wanted it, but there was something done. There was stuff done. There were storyboards done. There were sets built for these situations. It was fucking there. So I think by now, anybody that says the Zack Snyder cut does not exist is just completely ignorant to the situation.
Yes.
If you believe
that, moron.
If you believe at this point that there is no Zack Snyder cut, if you want to play semantics and say there's no perfect cut, man, there's nothing that's exact, there's not a cohesive story, then whatever, you can play semantics all you want on that. But is there a cut that fucking Zack Snyder himself assembled?
Right.
Yes.
Yes, there is. What people...
He presented something to someone at one point.
Exactly.
And those numerous articles have stated that.
The thing that blows my mind is the fact that... And I was reading comments even today saying that Snyder fanboys just need to get over it, that there's not a Snyder cut. They don't know how filmmaking works. And it took everything in me to go, you know what, fucker, you don't know how filmmaking works. Because I don't think anyone is asking for the Batman v Superman ultimate cut of it just to be this completely clean version of the film that they release. We want to know what his vision was. If there's green screen, who gives a fuck? Like, right. We just want to know.
There's a different type of fucking Steppenwolf?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He's PS2 Steppenwolf?
Right.
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to see what his vision was and what it was supposed to be. Slap that stuff together, let him do it, and roll it out. No one is saying that there's this completely clean, nice, finished film out there, because obviously he didn't finish it. But there is something. There's something with Hans Zimmer's score. There's something with... Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Well, Slash, they're partners or whatever. But yeah, Junkie XL score. There's obviously, as Matt said, there's PS2, you know, CGI versions of certain scenes that are being rendered. There's set pieces that are being created. So something is out there. So fuck off to anyone who says that there isn't any of that. And as Matt said, he obviously had to show some version of the film to WB executives.
Even these people that say he was fired are saying that he showed them a cut.
Exactly.
To get himself fired.
Right.
So there's a cut. There's
right.
something out
there's
there.
Something. Yes.
He presented something to Jeff Johns and a bunch of other vaginas to fucking get fired, apparently, or not. To leave the project, to piss somebody off. So, one point people say, apparently it's unwatchable. It's awful, or in this case, the guy that didn't like BVS thought it was impressive.
Right.
So we got 3 different fucking...
Or it doesn't exist.
What is that, adjectives? Right. I don't know. I shouldn't fucking say that shit out loud.
Yeah, please don't. I did not do well in English.
Look at the adjective. Play. Anyway, for wrestling fans...
Yes, for our wrestling fans, you will get that.
Anyway.
Especially 90s wrestling fans.
Yeah. So, my conclusion of all that information is it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
He probably wasn't fired. But he didn't just walk away. I think there might have been like, WB's like, yeah, you know, we don't really need you back right now. You know, maybe just stay home and relax. You know, we don't need you right now. Just, you know, Joss has got it. Don't worry. Don't worry.
I think there's a high probability that Snyder said, hey, or even WB could have said, hey, we have Joss Whedon, you know, this signed on. Would you want to use him because this tragedy has happened
for you
to fill in and complete the film? And Snyder was like, yeah, you know. And,
did he know that there was going to be a complete overhaul?
Right, probably not. And I think WB took that and said, okay, why? And regardless of if he quit, if they forced him out, if he's fired, whatever, they took that opportunity and said, fuck his vision. We're going to change it. We're going to change the entire third act. We're going to change the very first thing you see in this movie is going to be shit-ass CGI. Very fucking first thing you see in this damn movie. Fuck. But so at some point, the executives clearly said, this is perfect opportunity for us to spend a shit ton more money, have Joss Whedon bring the cast back, and we're going to change the way that this movie was supposed to be presented.
I put this to an answer to one of the guys on our YouTube page, and this is what I came to the conclusion of, is in that gap between May and June before the reshoots happened. I think that what happened with WB is they look at this situation, and there's a bunch of bean counters and a bunch of motherfuckers out there, some analysts, that are examining the month, right? All right, it's middle of November. Just Star Wars comes out in the middle of December, so we got a month. We got a month before Star Wars obliterates the box office. So what's the best possible scenario that we can get the biggest return on investment? If we shorten up the movie to 2 hours, okay, so now we got to make it 2 hours, right? So now we got to make a cohesive movie in 2 hours. Well, with Zach's footage, we can't, because he has his movie's obviously a lot longer. The story threads are expanded, so it's impossible to answer certain questions at certain points. Like, we'll talk about more of this in the deleted scene, but I just want to point this out. Some people were talking about, why did they delete the Alfred scene that we saw that came out recently? Well, because technically in the theatrical cut, Lois explains everything to Clark. So why would he need to meet Alfred? He doesn't need to, because they reshot it to where Lois tells him, Clark told me everything. They really need your help. It sounded urgent. You know, she does all that stuff. So she takes away the Alfred scene just with that couple sentences. So that's why he doesn't need to meet Alfred. He doesn't need to be there, because Alfred is not going to give him any information he doesn't already know from Lois. So that's what they did. They can cut that scene out because they added 2 extra sentences to Lois.
Right.
That's what they did. Fucking taken down to the absolute minimum to make a somewhat cohesive story. And that's why they did it. That's what I came to the conclusion. This is the best way. And they added in those jokes because they feel it would get more mass appeal. 2 hours, mass appeal. And they made fourth quarter goals.
Earnings. Yep.
Jordan fades back. Swoosh. And that's the game.
I agree with you. I just think it's boom, mic drop. No, please don't drop our mic. It's expensive. Don't even hit it, damn it.
I know, it's gentle. It's fragile.
Well, it's expensive for us because we use a lot of free software, clearly. I do agree with you. And it obviously at some point they said we need to transition here. We need to change up how the feel of how this is going to be. We're going to use some of Snyder's stuff first half, maybe half a second act, and then the rest is going to have to be Joss to make a cohesive story. I still think that you could have saved a ton of money by bringing in an experienced director to just utilize what he had. They obviously butchered the shit out of Batman v Superman and pulled out a bunch of crap where you're like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. They could have done the same thing and just had him finish it. Had him,
but then it would have been mainstream appeal. That's the thing,
right? Exactly. That
they went for mainstream short-term goals,
right? Exactly. I think that is the key transition of it, even though they needed to get it to 2 hours because of, of money and how many showings they can have in the theater. They also said we need to change how this is going to be perceived, and it needs to have jokes and quips and stuff like that.
And we don't even know if they spent any of their money, because you got to understand how these things work. There's investors, sponsors, and everything like that. That's how they make their money on these movies.
Still, they spent money.
WB, but we don't even know. They could have got a sponsor for that $25 million for those reshoots.
Yeah.
They could have got a sponsor. They could have got an investor and stuff like that. It doesn't come directly out of WB's pocket for those reshoots. They mathematically figure some things in. Okay, we can get 10,000 from these motherfuckers to plug in whatever they plug in, shit like that, in the investment. Maybe something with Walmart or whatever they did. They had those commercials and shit like that for the Walmart backpacks and shit like that.
Oh yeah, well, like AT&T, when I went in there around Christmas time, fucking Justice League stuff all over. Like they were playing the trailers on loop. And this was after the movie had already came out. This was Christmas time.
So that's
actually
a
the day
collaboration.
after Christmas.
This is a collaboration right here for everybody to make money.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that money could come.
But it's still tanked, for the most part.
But they made their fourth quarter goal. Someone looked at this and like, all right, well, this is what
all we have to do. Yeah.
This is what we got to do. And they made fourth quarter goals. And like you talked about before, it leans into that conspiracy about the bonuses and everything else. And they looked at it financially. I know people will disagree or hate that idea anyway. And I completely agree with you and everything. Yeah. But honestly, when you look at it, it was a complete investment strategy.
Yeah.
That's how it looked. That's what it looks like to me. Is that they weren't trying to copy Marvel. Well, they were trying to copy Marvel, but that wasn't like, oh, okay, we need to copy Marvel. We need to make the most amount of money on this and lock this bitch in for 2 hours so we don't get destroyed by Star Wars and lose all our money.
Right. Well, I do think part of it is, in addition, let's copy Marvel. We have Marvel's director, and obviously he made $1 billion on both Avenger movies. So let's just go ahead and see if he can do it again. Let's use his format instead of the one that we've been using that critically gets panned, all that shit.
And according to test audiences in September, it had a bunch of shits and giggles. So
yeah, of course it did.
A bunch of people liked it. Yeah. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. All these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.